Hello. If you're a parent in Alberta right now, like I am, uh, you are probably interested in learning about the program of studies, or as it's also known as the curriculum. I'm here to talk to you about the social studies curriculum as it currently stands, not the proposed curriculum that was released this week. This here is a guide to how to read and understand the purposes of this particular curriculum. A lot of parents have become engaged and are trying to understand what what is being changed and how is that being changed. Why are people up in arms about the new curriculum? And why are people saying this is a step backwards from where we currently are? So I'm here to walk you through that to help you understand. To give you a little bit of background on me, I was born here in Calgary, Alberta, where I still teach. I'm a university professor of social studies education, and I'll be focusing on the social studies program of studies. And I taught high school for 6 years before becoming a professor, and have been enjoying it uh, ever since I started my path in education. So I'm going to talk through this piece by piece so that you understand what it is, and I'll provide the link to the program of studies so that you also have access to it. So the program of studies is written from in each subject area. In this particular one is social studies, from kindergarten all the way to grade 12. And for the entire social studies program, we have what we refer to in education as the front matter. Now, the front matter is made up of several different sections where it tells you about the program philosophy, how how the uh, how the Ministry of Education thinks about what social studies is for, and how Alberta Education frames this so that teachers have an idea of what their goals are. So I'm going to walk you through it part by part. I'm not going to read it to you. I'm not going to tell you what the content is. You can read that yourself. You're very capable. I'm just giving you a guide of how to navigate it and how to understand how it's put together. So you'll see on this first page here, you have the program rationale and philosophy. And as I mentioned a moment ago, this is a directive for teachers. How do we think of social studies? What are the purposes? What are our aims? And here you'll see that those aims are broken down into a series of values and attitudes, knowledge and understanding, skills and processes. And we'll return to these in just a little while. Now, in terms of these outcomes, we have some foundational concepts built into the social studies curriculum. And you can think of these as themes. So some of these in this infographic, it helpfully um, has you look from the core of what social studies is, citizenship and identity, all the way out to the specific outcomes, which are the fine details of what should be taught about. So we have themes of time, continuity, and change. So these are focused on history primarily, culture and community. So about the social aspects of what is a community, global connections, learning about the world, and we've got the resources and the environment where we're thinking about how do we use the resources available to us, power, authority, and decision making. Now we're getting into civics, and land, places, and people. So this might be about Alberta, it might be about Canada, it might be about the world. And this is a lot of where the focus on indigeneity and indigenous peoples come into play. As we move down from this infographic, It goes into a little more detail about the program foundations, which are really the the core ideas that we're trying to get across, the core themes that we're touching upon throughout the K to 12 curriculum, which are concepts related to citizenship and identity, um, social studies and Aboriginal, or as we now say, Indigenous perspectives and experiences, Francophone perspectives and experiences, pluralism, diversity, and cohesion. And those are really important for driving teachers to look at what's important, stay focused on what Alberta education has identified as the core ideas for us to pay attention to. Now, if you look at what Alberta Education through this program of studies is asking us to do as educators at the K to 12 level, it is really about getting kids to ask questions, make connections, write, share their ideas and understanding, listening, collaboration, empathizing with viewpoints. So you see that there's a lot of skill building that is at the heart of this particular curriculum. And even in terms of issues focused approaches, you're looking at current events and controversial issues and teaching kids how do you engage in controversial issues, how do you understand current affairs. So, and built into that is the kinds of media literacy that we're increasingly seeing as being important. Then goes to on to expand upon these particular domains of learning. Now, as you see here, we get to what are called general and specific outcomes, which I'm going to touch on later. I'm going to skip forward a little bit to get us to what is known as the scope and sequence. You can think of the scope and sequence as the summary. So in each grade, these are what are called the general outcomes. General outcomes you can think of as the major categories of topics that we're going to cover in the program of studies. And you can see that there's only 2 or 3 of them in the first 3 years, the kindergarten and the first 3 grades. You only have 2 major aspects that you're covering, whereas in grade 4, 5, and 6, you have 3 in grade 4 and 5, and you have 2 major ones in grade 6. Now, on the linkages and sequencing, it's talking about the overarching purpose of these 2 general outcomes. What are we trying to get teachers to do and students to learn in these grades? So you may have noticed this already, but what you're looking at here in terms of scope and sequence is what's called an expanding horizons model. That takes the underlying idea that our kids at age 5 don't really even have a good concept of self or belonging in or how to put words to that. And so we're working from the individual to wider and wider circles of connection, right the way to the globe in grade 3. And then there's a deeper dive of places and concepts in grade 4, 5, and 6, and that continues through to more abstract concepts as they get into high school. You have 2 general outcomes. And the first general outcome for kindergarten is I am unique. And the second, I belong. And so a big part of the kindergarten curriculum is understanding how am I unique? How are other people different? And how is it that we can see things in different ways, or like different things, or be scared of different things? So each of these have what are called specific outcomes that go underneath them, which are more specific or specified information, content that we teach about. Now, when we connect it to these skills and processes, each time we use a specific outcome, we're meant to connect it to the dimensions of thinking or the social participation or research and deliberative inquiry or communication. So teachers are always looking for the connection. If I'm teaching about belonging, how do I get my kids to think creatively or critically? Um, and that happens differently at all different levels of our students' abilities. But we do know that students are able to do this. So you can see here that you've got the general outcome, which was mentioned up above. I'm unique. Here's the general outcome. Students will demonstrate an understanding and appreciation of multiple social, physical, cultural, linguistic factors that contribute to an individual's unique identity. Very general. So, a parent could rightly see that and think, well, what does that mean? What's my kid going to be learning? Well, this is where the specific outcomes come in. And you see the values and attitudes that kindergarten teachers are expected to convey to students, the knowledge and understanding of it. For general purposes, you can think of the knowledge as the what, when, and who of a question, whereas understanding is around the how and the why. Okay, now to read this K.1.3, all that means is that this is relevant to kindergarten. It is the first general outcome, I am unique, and this is the third specific outcome. And you can see that many of these, especially as we get to the older grades, these specific outcomes have specific sub points that we're supposed to cover. So you can see value oral traditions of others, that storytelling is a very big part of a kindergarten classroom, and that storytelling would take many different weeks or months if you're looking at multiple different ways peoples around the world and in our community tell stories. Okay, so now we've gotten to the specific outcomes of students will be able to do these specific things as a result of the program of studies that are connected to the general outcomes and are connected to the dimensions of thinking and other processes that are there. Now I want to slide down here a little further. Knowledge and understanding kinds of objectives are meant to be connected to these skills and processes. So you think of the knowledge and understanding of the what we're going to have students do, and think of the skills and processes as the how are we going to do it? How are we going to teach them in ways that develop critical thinking and creative thinking skills or develop historical thinking skills? So each day when a teacher is building a lesson for your children, what they're thinking about is not just, okay, I have this information to convey to students, but I also have these skills and processes that I'm going to filter this content through. So it's not just that students are getting information, it's that they're actually doing something with that information, that they're learning the skills that they need to eventually be able to use them widely and effectively out in the world. Now, obviously, what a kindergarten student is capable of doing and what a 12th grade student is capable of doing are very different. For the sake of seeing the complexity, I'm going to move down a little further and talk about one of the later grades. So let me skip over here to grade 4, since that's focused on Alberta. So grade 4, the land, histories, and stories of Alberta. And you have 3 general outcomes, which are described here, as well as local and current affairs. Same dimensions of thinking, and the social participation and democratic practice, deliberative inquiry, and communication. Those are the same. Now, how those skills and processes play out are different and developmentally appropriate for 9 and 10-year-olds who are entering grade 4. So you can see here, as we get to specific outcomes with those general outcomes, there's a lot more specified here. Now, this is where teachers have legitimate complaints that this is a lot to cover. Now, you wouldn't think that looking at this and saying, well, you've got a page and a little bit for each of these outcomes, for each of these general outcomes, you should be able to cover that. But if you take time to read through what's already there, just this first one, appreciate the diversity of elements pertaining to geography, climate, geology, and paleontology in Alberta, you can see that that's not a one-day kind of teaching event, that there's a lot more to that teachers need to unpack. Okay, one last piece that I want to point out in terms of reading the program of studies is you'll notice in parentheses these different letters or acronyms that are here. What that is referring to, if you look down at the bottom of this page here, are the different domains in which teachers are drawing connections between themes across the entire year. The second piece I want to leave you with is that curriculum is complex. It's not something that we realize how much work teachers put into not just delivering the content as if our kids were just banks and the teachers were making deposits that would stay there for all eternity, but rather teachers do a lot of work in drawing connections between the content knowledge and the skills that students are developing and weaving them into what is ultimately something that is understandable, digestible, meaningful, and relevant to students. And they don't get enough credit for how hard and how much work that is. Please keep in mind our kids are in good hands with hardworking, thoughtful, caring teachers who really are experts in what they do. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope this enables you to better understand Alberta's program of studies.